Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings to the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are in the poem By Blue Ontario's Shore, and we're going to now look at sections 4 and 5 as a unit. I continue to be blown away by the ways in which Whitman reinvents himself over and over again in this poem, giving us all these different permeations on himself as poet and, of course, us as the great poem, as he's going to make the argument in Blue Ontario. Here we're going to meet Whitman as the new Socrates. That is to say, the new prophet. That is to say, the voice of the one who says, be careful, beware. And we're going to play that one out here in passages 4 and 5. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt is the name of our playlist. And that you've been following our stuff from that very first word come, which we're going to come back to that word, no pun intended there. We're going to come back to that word over and again in this poem, and we're going to see it right here in this sections 4 5. And we've given a set of introductory comments to Ontario, and we've already worked passages 1 through 3 as we turn now to passages 4 and 5. And we will pick up then with some pretty testy language after the final line of passage 3, produce great persons, the rest follows. And there seems to be a suggestion in passage 4 that if you don't do that, then this is what you're going to get. And there's several words here that will only get used one time in all Leaves of Grass, and it's right here. Piety, only used one time, by the way, in Leaves of Grass right here. And conformity to them that like. Peace, obesity, allegiance to them that like. I am he who tauntingly compels men, women, nations, crying, leap from your seats and contend for your lives. Now, what he means here by piety is just a blind adherence to the rules. Conformity, of course, the same. And to them that like, he means, if that's what you like, fine. I will let you go ahead and play that game. Then he goes to peace, which is interesting because it seems that's what he wants in drum taps. But now notice, this is a different kind of peace. This is a kind of laziness that he will be objecting to. And of course, the word obesity, only one time used in all of Leaves of Grass, and here it is. Obesity, meaning to be kind of full, overfilled. We saw some of this idea when we did Song of the Open Road, when he starts talking about people who kind of live behind their masks and they never actually enjoy life. Allegiance here means the same thing. Allegiance to some kind of blind ideas. To them that like. In other words, I'm willing to let those of you who want to be sheep be sheep. That's his point. That's his point. I am he, and again, that construction of I am, we're going to see it again later here in a second. We've seen it so many times in Leaves of Grass. I am he who tauntingly, only one time ever used in Leaves of Grass, it's right here. Tauntingly compels, also only one time used in all Leaves of Grass, it's right here. Tauntingly compels men, women, nations, crying, and then instead of a comma with quotation marks, he just simply makes the L of leap a capital, crying, leap from your seats and contend for your lives, exclamation point. In other words, what is it that we're saying here? It's time to go to work. It reminds us of Dante's Inferno, passage 24, the up on your feet passage. We've given full lectures, of course, of all of this at learnstrong.net for Dante. Crying, leap from your seats and contend for your lives. I love that he will say that I am a poet who is much like Socrates. I am he who walks the states. You'll remember the last two words of the last poem of Memories of President Lincoln were in fact the states. I am he who walks the states with a barbed tongue. Barbed only gets used one time in Leaves of Grass, it's right here. With a barbed tongue, questioning everyone I meet. Boy, oh boy, does that sound like, our Socrates and our study of Socrates. In other words, the gadfly, isn't that what he says in Plato's Apology? The gadfly. I am the contender, in other words. I am the one who is tauntingly compelling. I'm the one with the barbed tongue, questioning everyone I meet. And then, using this formulation of who are you, he'll play this game. Now we're going to see this again in passage 12. Who are you that wanted only to be told what you knew before? Who are you that wanted only a book to join you in your nonsense? Nonsense used only one time in all Leaves of Grass, and it's here. In other words, he challenges his readers to say, look, if you want to be sheep and just follow along blindly, that's fine. But I'm not that poet, and I am not speaking to you. We've seen this kind of bellicosity, acrimony. We've seen it several times already in Leaves of Grass before. It does come to mind, and here we are with the parenthetics now again. With pangs and cries as thine own, O bearer of many children. We're back, of course, to passage 2 in the mother. These clamors wild to a race of pride I give. Clamors is used one time in Leaves of Grass, and it's right here. I find that fascinating. A race of pride I give. In other words, there seems to be an argument that Whitman is going to make that we fell into this whole thing of civil strife, the war, because of a certain kind of sheep mentality that allowed for people to just kind of go along. And he says, we got to stop that. And then he goes to work. O lands, would you be freer than all that has ever been before? If you would be freer than all that's been before, come, listen to me. I told you about the word come. And here we are back to the very first word of all of Leaves of Grass. In other words, no more acquiescing. No more just following along. It will be the argument that he will make now through the rest of Blow, Ontario, that it is the job of the poet to awaken that sense of independence while at the same time providing that sense of democracy. And now he's going to talk about what could go wrong if we are sheep. Fear, he says it, sounding very much like a prophet. I follow, of course, the use of the idea of prophet from the great Robert Odine, the great theologian, the great lecturer on mythology. And it's Odine who argues that the prophet in Old Testament theology and study is not so much somebody who's always predicting the future, but rather somebody who is always saying, beware. And here we're going to see it. Fear, grace. Now the word grace here is not the theological use of the word grace. It means like embellishments. Fear, grace, elegance, civilization. And here again, he means that old path, to go back to Song of the Open Road, delicacies, fear the mellow, sweet, the sucking of honey juice. And then he uses the word beware twice. Beware the advancing mortal ripening of nature. And of course, the use of the word ripening immediately makes us think of Leaves of Grass. Beware what precedes the decay of the ruggedness of states and men. Now, of course, this idea of what precedes the decay will take us back to Song of Myself 49 with the decay in the muck. It will make us think, of course, of the earlier proclamations that he has made, that we should have seen this coming. We should have somehow understood this is the way civilizations rot from the inside out. And to that degree, I mean, there's any number of suggestions of ways that we've already seen this argument being made in Leaves of Grass, certainly in Drum Taps and Memories of President Lincoln. I mean, just go back to our ideas in Lilacs. Fear the mellow sweet, the sucking of honey juice. In other words, the frail, the weak, the inducements. And then the advancing, beware the advancing moral ripening of nature. In other words, if you're not strong, we think of Gibbon's rise and fall of the Roman Empire, don't we, right, in 1776. If you're not strong, you will corrupt from the inside. And what precedes the decay of the ruggedness of states and men. By the way, the word ruggedness only gets used one time in Leaves of Grass, and it's right here. In other words, we should have seen it coming. That's his argument. We should have seen it coming. And again, guys, I feel like I have to say this. There is good reason for us to engage in these talks with Walt, as we're calling them, this reading of the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass. One of those is we have this tendency to forget. We have this tendency to forget that, in fact, in the end, the real corrosiveness will always be from the inside. That we will become so soft that we will end up decaying, right? And because of that, we get what we deserve, is the argument that Whitman will make. Passage 5 now, to finish this section, will take us to his continued argument that we've got to be alert, be aware. Ages, precedents, have long been accumulating undirected materials. That is to say, there's this notion of nations without a purpose. America brings builders and brings its own styles. I love that it's styles and not style. Did you see that? I love that. In other words, America has its own way of playing this game of styles. By the way, America gets used as a word 15 times in Ontario, and I love that. He just keeps coming back to it. And I told you, when he uses the word America in Leaves of Grass, it's kind of an important moment. I hear America singing in the light. Notice he continues, as the poet who will be the builder now. The immortal poets of Asia and Europe, that is to say Homer and Virgil and the rest of them, have done their work and passed to other spheres. In other words, he's going to appreciate Homer and Virgil and Dante and Milton and Shakespeare and all the other great ones. A work remains, the work of surpassing all they have done. Now, this word surpassing will come back in The Singer in the Prison passage too. It's the only other time that we'll see it, later in Leaves of Grass. That idea of transcending and including, as we commented on it, is a fundamental evolutionary idea. In other words, everything that's come before, we've seen this over and over again in Leaves of Grass, haven't we? Everything that's come before is preparing for this thing called America. Now, of course, America had to go through that experience of the war to get to where we are right now. There is still work to be done. A work remains. And then he comes back to it. America. And then he'll use the word curious, which takes us back for the first time to starting from Almanac 2. Curious toward foreign characters, stands by its own at all hazards. Back to Emerson's self-reliance. Stands removed, spacious, composite, sound. Notice that's 5. Initiates the true use of precedents. In other words, we know how to read history. This is his point. We know how to read history. History is pointing directly towards this moment in time, and of course to America itself. And then he says it does not repel them or the past or what they produced under their forms. Now, our Nortons will tell us that beginning with this phrase does not repel, the remainder of this section and most of the following, section 6, is composed from the 1855 preface. And to go back and read the 1855 preface is truly remarkable, but here's so much of what he has to say in that preface. The high points, if you will, are all emphasized. Does not repel them or the past or what they produced under their forms, takes the lesson. In other words, studies the past, takes the lesson with calmness, perceives the corpse slowly born from the house. Think about our lilacs and the power of that imagery, right? Perceives that it waits a little while in the door. Again, back to lilacs last in the dooryard bloom. That it was fittest for its days. In other words, what Europe produced was ripe for its time. But now, the new. And of course, the new equals America, and this will be his argument about learning the lessons of history and all of that. I think it's fitting that I would mention Gibbon and the decline of the Roman Empire, right? The fall of the Roman Empire, was that it was finished for its days, that its life has descended to the stalwart and well-shaped heir who approaches, and that he shall be fittest for his days. The key word is descendant, that is to say, the child of. And this one takes us back to Tennyson's Ulysses. This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle well loved of me. He works his work, I mine. And I find it interesting that the word work gets used here. I think standing behind some of what Whitman is doing here is in fact appreciating the idea that fathers have to hand on to their children. And whatever it is that the father has done, hopefully the child will transcend it. In passage 46, 47, A Song of Myself, it's destroy the teacher, and we're playing the same game here. Any period, one nation must lead. Now, there are some who find, again, this is more messaging than music, but I find this a compelling idea as we play the game. Any period, one nation must lead. One land must be the promise and reliance of the future. Again, we're back to this idea of self-reliance. In other words, everybody is looking at America to see, how will you respond after the war? And the answer is, we will lead the world. And then you're going to get 5 heres, as in immediacy. These states, again, the last line of dust at the end of Memories of President Lincoln. These states are the amplest poem. Again, what is, America was asked this, and Emerson commented on this as well. Europe would ask, well, where is your great epic? I mean, you can't be a country without an epic. Here it is. These states are the amplest poem. We are the great epic. In other words, while Leaves of Grass may be our epic poem, Whitman himself will argue the nation is in fact the epic poem. And then 5 here's. Here is not merely a nation, but a teeming nation of nations. We're going to finish actually with Emma Lazarus's The New Colossus and the influence, I think, of some of these lines. Notice, here is not merely a nation, but a teeming nation of nations, capital N, nation of nations. Here, by the way, it's going to be land of lands in a few moments. Here, the doings of men correspond with the broadcast doings of the day and night. Here is what moves in magnificent masses, careless of particulars. Here are the ruffs, beards. I told you about facial hair. By the way, ruffs, in the 1855 version of Song of Myself, you'll remember it was Walt Whitman, an American, one of the ruffs, a cosmos. He edited that line, but ruffs, beards. Friendliness, combativeness. You would think those two would not necessarily go together, and yet for Whitman they will. The soul loves. Here, the flowing trains. Here, the crowds, equality, diversity. The soul loves. And the 5th passage then will come to that end with the repetition of the word, the soul, the phrase, the soul loves. In other words, the soul longs for all of those things, equality, diversity. And what is all of that? It's America. And it is the work that must be done after the war. At 2a, well, of course, I think the point here is that the poet-prophet, the new Socrates, if you will, sees the future America as being born of self-reliance. The war, in other words, was necessary to grow the new country, right? At 2b, I love the bardic voice that Whitman is beginning to create. Can you hear it here? And it will just grow now as we turn to passage 6 and beyond. At 3a, I just want to point out Emma Lazarus's classic, The New Colossus. We've given a full lecture on it, of course, published in 1883, placed on the Statue of Liberty in 1903. The New Colossus, not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. For her beacon hand glows world-wide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands, you storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Finally, at 3b, is America still, do you think, the nation of nations? Do you think that Whitman still has the right to be read out loud and to speak of America as the nation of nations? Come back to passage 6, 7, and 8. We'll enjoy those together. Thank you.